Hello, abnormal family. Here's the Christmas one that I promised you guys. My allergies are a little bad tonight, so you'll have to excuse me on that. But I wanted to get this Christmas one out to you because, well, I think it's a good one. My cousin was coming over. We will call him Jay. He was my mother's nephew and a few years older than me. At the time, Jay was about 19 to 20. He was coming to spend a weekend with us, and I was pumped. He was bringing his Doom game for the PlayStation, and I had just bought a cheat code magazine. That's right, back in the early 2000s, you had to buy a magazine for cheat codes. That's not the creepy part of the story, just for the younger audience. Jay and I were determined to get through all 666 levels in a single session. We had all the required supplies, 2 bags of chips, a case of Mountain Dew, and even some hoagies for dinner. My parents were going out for Christmas shopping, and we were in charge of my younger brother, who we will call A. He was about 7 or so at the time. The night was going great. It was a quiet Friday night, and school had been canceled after a typical Pennsylvania snow squall dumped 5 inches of the powdery stuff out of nowhere. We had just finished our hoagies, and our parents had just left the driveway. Darkness had just fallen, and the PA nights come quick in December. It was the perfect night. We had been playing now for about 2 hours when we heard what sounded like footsteps in the attic. We figured my parents were stashing their first haul, and we tried to keep A's attention on the game. He was a tad spooked, but it wasn't something we should be alarmed about after all. Those could be our gifts too. The noises continued for about 20 minutes off and on. I decided to get some water. My teenage way of snooping to catch a glimpse of Santa's sack. Funny thing was, my parents' car wasn't in the driveway, but the noises were upstairs. I called Jay, since he was significantly larger. I'm about 6'1", 240 pounds, but I was half that weight then. Jay was 6'5", 300 pounds back then, so he was a pretty big guy. And I asked him to check the attic. It was like the opening of E.T. when the teenager grabs the knives and exclaims about checking it out. The attic was quite dark, to our surprise, locked and empty. Now, this isn't the first time in the house that paranormal events transpired. The house was so active. I got in trouble because I was accused of leaving the basement door opened every morning before school. It got to the point my no-nonsense father installed a hook and latch on the door to keep it from opening. We decided to head back to the game and keep quiet. No need to get all worked up since he was playing his turn on Doom, and thanks to the God mode, wasn't dying and he was having a blast. We took our posts in my bedroom and relaxed for a brief period before the house decided that it was time for round 2. I heard noises coming from the basement door. I'd had enough and announced I'd be letting out Jericho, our pit bull, to use the bathroom. I went out to the kitchen to let him out back for a change. The basement door was wide open. I think I grumbled and shut it. I wasn't keen on getting grounded for this. As I let the dog out, I noticed footprints leading from the woods out back, going up to our porch and then around the house. I left the dog out, but his attention went immediately to the roof. I followed his gaze and thought I saw somebody or something duck down on the other side of the roof. Nope, not today. I didn't want to see that. We ran back inside and I told everything to my cousin. We didn't have a cell phone back then. We couldn't really afford them, and they were more of a luxury item than commonplace in those parts. So calling my parents wasn't an option. We did what any normal young men would do. We lacked common sense, grabbed our favorite boomsticks with our hunting walkie-talkies, and locked ourselves in the bedroom with the dog and A. In our defense, we thought somebody was trying to break in. The house was mostly dark from our game session, and we figured we could easily handle this ourselves. So out into the night we went. Jay and I saw a figure duck down on the other side of the roof as we went out the back door. We turned the walkie-talkies on and circled the one-story ranch as quietly as possible, only we didn't see anything other than some footprints. We figured we were playing a game of tag with the culprit, and they simply went to the other side. Our suspicious intruder was caught peeling over the crest of the roof, but we couldn't make out anything other than the head that appeared to be just a shadow. Jay quickly ran around to the other side, but not before leaning in to whisper, "Stay here. I'll talk loud and circle around. You hide behind the oak in the yard. I'll radio you when I'm in the back. Our friend should pop back over, and once you level that 16 gauge, the game is over and we can call the cops." That was the plan. I know, not exactly foolproof, but you can claim to know everything at 16. So off Jay went. He was talking to me loudly as he went around the side of the house to hide, and I hid behind the tree. This was where it got interesting. My radio squawked to life. "Do you see him?" Jay called. "No," I whispered, now that my position was given away. The radio crackled. "He just went over the roof to your side." My blood ran cold. I never took my gaze off the house. It was as if our burglar had just disappeared. I called Jay back and went inside to check on A. He was hysterics. He said the doorknob had jiggled, and that Jericho, our dog, had ran into the door, growling. We had knocked on the door not even 3 minutes later, telling him to open up. We didn't tell A what happened. We said we'd seen Santa, and because we moved since last Christmas, he said he was just making sure that he had the right address. A bold-faced lie. But we weren't sure when my parents would get home, and as on cue, we heard my father's pickup pull into the garage. And I described what had happened to my dad, and the footprints were still visible on the roof. My dad dismissed it like usual. It was probably a raccoon or something, which was one of his favorite lines he used to downplay something unexplainable in the woods. We never did see what it was, but that house was generous in spooky events, and we could also tell that what it was wearing a hat. A stocking hat, almost like what Santa Claus would wear. That was the weird thing. I swore I saw a little person cut back watching from the trees, and I didn't know what a significance it was at the time, just being a kid from the sticks, but I saw a black coyote watching from the woods out back a week later. It was pretty large, and it wasn't afraid of me and my dog. It ran into the woods and stopped, looking back as if it wanted us to follow it. Next year, however, next year we all got cell phones before Christmas and ended up moving. Needless to say, my father ended up telling us a story after we had moved he was afraid to tell us while we lived there. Later that night, after he had put us to sleep, he had went outside and found large boot tracks. He said the boot tracks were all around the bedroom window where we had laid playing the game. Whatever it was had stood there for a long while watching us. And the weird thing was, he found in the backyard that night when he went out to look, was a Santa's hat. It was covered in what looked like dry blood, Dad said, like something had rubbed it all in the guts of a processed deer or some dog or some elk or something. But it was covered in guts, and the stench was so strong that my dad nearly puked, and he hunted a lot and was used to that kind of thing. He said he took the hat, put it into a sack, and burned it with the garbage that night. Why was there a Santa Claus hat laying in the backyard with blood all over it and guts? And why was whatever was on our roof wearing a Santa's hat? Well, guys, I kind of think that this might have either had been something that was dressed like Santa Claus to try to trick these kids into trusting it. It was going to try to come into the house. Or it was trying to maybe, I'm not sure, let them see it outside so they would come outside thinking it was Santa Claus. Or if it would have came in the house, they wouldn't have been alarmed at first. This is a pretty freaky story if you ask me. And for something to dress up like Santa, that really makes you wonder, and it trying the doorknob. So this Christmas, guys, if you hear a noise outside or something on your roof, I would be more careful as to look to make sure that your kids don't go out, because it just might be something dressed up waiting for a little Christmas Eve snack, and it may not be looking for cookies and milk. I hope you all enjoyed this one. I hope you guys have a Merry Christmas. And keep your head on a swivel and don't be something's dinner. And we'll see you on the next one.